So hi everyone, hope you are doing well. So we recorded a last video and then we added the custom authentication in the full stack application. The application stack was the Node.js on the backend and the Next.js on the mixed frontend side. So then a few users recommended us to create a video on the OAuth as well. So this is the video. So in this project, we're gonna add the OAuth 2.0 integration to the Node.js based application. We'll be adding the Google sign-in approach into the Node.js. We'll be taking help from the Passport.js library and we'll be getting the secret keys from the Google console, and then we'll be adding the sign-in with Google option. And this was the previous video which you guys recommended us to add another approach that we can add the OAuth integration and we can have the session management within that. So this in this video, we're gonna add that. We'll be using the Google sign-in option, we'll be using the Passport.js, we'll be handling the sessions in this project. So without wasting much time, let's dive into that. And after this, we'll be adding a quick overview that what exactly is the OAuth, what are the benefits of using the OAuth, what was the problem behind that the OAuth was invented. So we'll be having a quick introduction into that as well. So without wasting much time, let's dive into that. So hey everyone. So now we'll have a very short introduction onto the OAuth, that what exactly is the open authorization, that is the full form of the OAuth. So we'll understand about that. And another thing that we'll be using the Google sign-in approach with this application with using the Node.js, right? So now let's understand about the OAuth. So first we'll be moving on with the problems behind the OAuth, that why the OAuth was introduced. First thing was the end user's personal account safety. So if you create a new application, all right, so you ask the users for the sign up. So the users have to enter the email, phone number, password, and all these details. So if your application is new, then the users will not have the trust of sharing the passwords with you because your application is new. And even if your application is old, the user can have the same password for the Gmail, same password for the Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or anything. So the users may refrain by sharing the password and the phone numbers and all these details with you, right? So that's why there is a problem. Again, we have another problem of the custom logic for the password security. So if you don't use the OAuth, right, if you don't use the OAuth, then you have to spend a lot on the security, spend a lot of time, spend a lot of money on the security. And OAuth means the third party integration. It means like the big providers like the Google, GitHub, Twitter, they provide their sign in logic with you, right? So it means they have already spent millions and billions into that, and they continuously spend that because the security is very big concern from them. If they are providing all these details for nominal charge, then you can use that. And another thing was the single sign-on capability. So nowadays the applications uses the single sign-on. So you just sign in from a third-party provider again via the Google or GitHub. Then you move on. You just seam across that application. You can visit. Then you can see the details. And once you move out, your sign-in authorization token will be removed. So these are the single sign-on capability that you roam only once at their website. So this is the concept nowadays. So this is very helpful in the scenarios like if you just want to see the basic details and then you can come back, you don't need to log in for a longer duration. So these are for the very short duration authentication. And again, the risk of hack, like again, this is related to the second point. Again, you spend a lot of time and you spend a lot of money into the authentication authorization, but still a single flaw, a single mistake can cost you a lot, can cost your application, can break your application as well, can hack all your data. So there might be the risk of hack, and the big companies, they are already spending billions into the research of getting the a secure authentication, right? So that is the risk of hack with that. Now we'll see the benefits of using the OAuth, the open authorization. One thing, again, we have a secure access. The user signs in, you get the basic profile details like the email without entering the password. So entering the passwords nowadays is a mess. So they don't remember each and every password they mention, right? So now they have the passwordless sign in, and that is a secure access into that by having a Google's or any other provider's security. Again, the single sign-on which we discussed, so we can seam across any application seamlessly for a shorter duration. And then we have a fine-grained access. You only get the data that you want. Like if the third-party application is asking you for a sign-in using any provider, then they only want that data that is required. They don't want any other data. They will also show you the details that what data they are grabbing. Right? That's why we have a fine-grained access. And then there's a token management. So you can see there's a no token management at your end. So again, you don't need to scratch your head, make your hairs gray into the token management, because that is a mess, right? So you do not need to spend more time into the token management. Just use their provider, and that's it. So these are the benefits of using the OAuth. Now let's see the differences between the OAuth and the OAuth 2.0. Now you must have seen the OAuth and the OAuth 2.0. So there are a very basic difference between them. OAuth was the version 1, 2.0 is the version 2. So OAuth version 1, thus requests were all signed. They are the signed request. It means the HMAC. HMAC is the key that is used to identify if the message was the same message or not. They need to make sure that if that key is not malfunctioned, right? So these are the signed requests within the OAuth that was happening. But in the OAuth 2.0, they use the bearer tokens. These are the short-lived tokens, and they have access and the refresh tokens. So you do not need to use the HMAC keys because it takes a lot of time during the encryption and decryption of those keys. You just have the token, and you can just attach those tokens inside the headers, right? Then again, we have the access tokens, and they have the access, refresh, and expiry of the tokens as well. In the OAuth, they just use the access tokens, right? So there was a scenario, there could be the scenarios as well where the tokens was not revoked, right? So you can access the tokens again and again. But in the OAuth 2.0, they have the refresh based scenarios. Only if the application is active, the token will be refreshed or not. They will be expired. And again, they have the shared secrets. Shared secret means inside the OAuth, suppose there's a client and there's a Twitter, right? The Twitter is the authentication provider. So the user on the client side needs to have the secret, and on the Twitter side as well, they have to they need a secret. So the secrets needs to be shared. So there might be the security, like the you cannot store the secrets into the front end, right? You cannot store that. So there was a security mismatch between the front end and the back end. So there was a very complicated way of sharing the secrets at both sides. But now into the OAuth 2.0, they again use the scopes. They have the token scopes. They have a good token management within that. They do not need the exact keys there and there. They just have the key at the provider side, and then they communicate over that. And they use the HTTPS over there. The HTTPS means encrypted data. So they have a better scope with that within the tokens. And again, the OAuth 1.0 has a limited use. Now the legacy systems only uses the OAuth 1.0 because that is older and mostly deprecated nowadays. And now with the OAuth 2.0, we have the industry standard of using the Google sign-in, GitHub sign-in, because nowadays mostly applications which are being built, they use the OAuth 2.0 for the quick access over this application. So this was the introduction on the OAuth. So now we'll move on to the coding part where we will just develop the OAuth based application, and we'll be using the Google sign-in with that. So guys, now we can start the actual implementation of this project. So it won't take much time. It will take just a couple of minutes, but you will get a good understanding of how the OAuth will work, right? So first we need to check how what are the dependencies that we require for this project. So the first dependency that we require is the session. So how we managing the session, right? We'll be using the Express session library, which is used for managing the sessions inside our application. And it is very useful library with working with the Passport and the OAuth libraries. Then the auth library that we'll be using the Passport, which is the official library for this OAuth. And then we'll be using the Google OAuth 2.0 library, which is this package. So it includes all the packages and all the code which supports the Google OAuth 2.0. Then for the routing, we'll need a very basic routing here. We'll be needing the Express for the routing, and then we'll be needing the .tnv for that, for the environment variables, because we'll be storing some secrets of the Google. So we'll be needing some client ID and the client secret from the Google. So you will get that from the Google console. I will show you the demo that how we can get that, because those are crucial. Now we can start into that. We can first choose the npmi, that could be the express. We'll be using the passport, we'll be using this library, the passport auth 2.0, and then we'll be needing the .env, and I'll be using the version 16 of the .env, and then we can hit enter for now. So now all the packages that we require will be now installed here. Now you can see inside the package.json, we have all the dependencies. Now we can move on. We haven't done the npm init, so we have to use the npm init dash dash y as well, so that all the description of this application goes into the package, right? Now let's move on. Now we can just add a test script over there. We can have the dev over there. We can have the dev again, that could be the node. We can have the server.js, right? So this will be our dev command over there, right? After that, we can just move on. We can create a new file, that could be the server.js. So now inside the server.js, first we have to think that what approach we have to take, right? First thing is we need to initialize an express application for the routing purposes. Second, we need to initialize the we need to initialize the second thing, that could be the passport. So we have to initialize the passport for that. The third thing could be very simple. We just need to move on. We just need to add all the support of the passport, like the sessions from the passport. And then we can add some things related to the login, and we can add the HTMLs for that. Right. So let's move on. We can have the const app, that will be equals to the require. Require could be equals to, we have the express, right? Then we can move on. Then we can have the cons passport, which is equals to, again we can have the require, that could be the passport over there, right? Then again we have to use a session. We have the const session, that could be equals to the require, be the express session that we require. Now we can move on. So we just need the const Google strategy, because this time we'll be using the Google strategy. So we just need to use a require. That could be, we have the passport Google Auth 2.0. So we get the Google strategy from there, right? So these are the imports for now. Then we can have the const app, that could be equals to the express, so that we can initialize a new Express.js application. So I think this could be equals to the express. Instead of that, we have the express. Then we can move on. So we can add a middlewares for that, because the passport library uses a lot of middlewares. So first middleware, the app dot use, we need to have the static imports, because now we'll be using the HTML files as well. We'll be using the HTML files inside the folder, that could be the views. Then we can have the login dot html, like that. All right, we have the login.html. So we need to add the HTML support, like we need to add the static file support, because HTMLs are the static files. So we need to add the support for that. We can have the express.static. This time we'll be joining the current directory path. How we can do that? We can import the path package. That could be equals to, we have the require, like that. That could be, we have the path. So from there we can just have something which is path dot join. So whatever directory we are in, so we need to get the current directory name. So in the Node.js, like in the CommonJS module support, we get the directory name like this, underscore underscore directory name. And then we have the views. All right. We have the views inside that. Now we'll have a static support for sending the files over there over the Node.js application. Now we can move on. So we just need to use the JSON support. We have the express.json, so that we can pass all the incoming data to the JSON. So these are the packages for the incoming data support. Now we can add the package, or we can add a middleware for the session management. So we can have the app.use, that could be the session that we require. So this is the session that we require. So this will auto manage your application session. That's why it is very popular library for managing the sessions. So here you just need to provide some properties. The first property that you provide is, you need to provide a secret. So either you can use a secret via config file. So you can have the config.js over there, and you can have some configuration support, like module.exports equals to, we can have the session secret. That could be any secret for now, xyz, anything with that. So that could be the session secret for now. And you can use the secret like this. You have the config, right? You have the config dot, we have the session secret. After that, we need a property which is resave. So what this property will do, and if you hover over that, you will see something like forces the session to be saved back to the session store, even if the session was never modified. It means even if the session is not modified yet, it will again resave the session. So it will just have some load into the memory. So we require this as a false because we don't want to save the session again and again if the session was same as for the last request again. Now we need something which is a save uninitialized. So this property requires to be true. This is very important property inside this. So if we hover over that, we will see something which is forces a session that is uninitialized. It means if the session is even uninitialized, we still need to save that session again, right? We need to save that session to the session store, which is again inside the memory, right? And a session is uninitialized when it is new but not modified. So for every new request, even if the session is uninitialized for now, we can store that inside the browser. All right, we can store that inside the memory, and one cookie will be saved inside the browser, right? And after that, for now, like this was for the session. Now again, we can move on. We can have something which is app.use, which is passport. Now the passport will take over. So we have the passport dot, that could be, we can have the initialize. So at this step, the passport will initialize, right? So initialize passport. And again, we can use another thing which is passport dot session. So what it will do, so it will modify the session. So it will modify the current session of our application. It will add some properties like the user object. Like this, it will add a user object within the session, and you can see that within the IntelliSense as well. So when the authentication will be completed, or if we don't have any authentication, so either the user object will be the exact user object from the Google, or it will be null, right? After that, we can move on. So we need something again which is app.use. That could be, we can have the login. So first we can redirect the user to the login page. And how we can do that? So we can do that by using the request and the response property, right? So we can just log something, that we have the request received for login, right? And then we can move on. We can just have the response dot send file, right? Now we have the response dot send file. So we need to send the HTML file which is there inside the login. We can just have the HTML5 layout for that, and then we can have the Google OAuth sign in, right? And then we can show something like, we can have a body like that could be only the button over there, like that could be the login with, that could be the Google, right? Now we have to send this file. So to send this file, we again need to generate the path, right? We need to generate the path. So we can again have the const file path again, right? That could be, again, we can have the path dot join, so that we can join the path dynamically. Then again, we can have something which is the directory name. Then we can have the views. Then what file do we have? We have the login.html. We have the login, right? We need to quote that. We need to add it inside the quotes, which is login.html, so that we have the file path. And then we can just send file with the file path like that, right? We can send the file path over there. And then now we can test this route, right? So before proceeding ahead with the passport, we can test this route. We can just have the app.listen property of the HTTP server which we are currently creating with the node. We need to define the port. So by default, we can set the port as 5000 for now. And again, we can move on. We have the console.log, that could be, we have the server open, right? We have the server open, and then we can try that. We have the npm run dev to try that out, right? Now we have the server open inside that. Now, if we move on to the Chrome, and if we just test something at the localhost port of 5000, so we can just have slash, we have the login over there. Now we have the button, right? Now we have the button of the login with Google. So this works perfectly fine, right? Now we can move on to our application again. So here, now let's start with the passport. So first thing that we require is we need a Google client key. We need a OAuth secret from the Google. So for that, we need to move on to the Google Auth. So we can open the Chrome. We need to move on to the cloud console of the Google. We have the console, right? So in this console of the Google, I think this is the console. So from this console, we need to move on and we need to just check the auth secret. Right. So you can see currently I had a course of the Node.js auth, which is published on Udemy. So I can use the secrets from them. So you can see we have the Node.js course auth. So I can open that. So inside that, you need to move on to the API services. You can create a new project and you can create the new project, and then you can move on to the project. Then you can move on, you can come to the auth consent screen, right? You can move on to the auth consent screen, and there you need to create the consent for the OAuth. So once you move on to the specific project, you need to move on to the credentials. You can create a new credential from them, right? You can create a new OAuth client ID, right? So after that, you need to just wait for a couple of seconds. Now you need to provide some details. Details require like the application type. So currently that is a web application. We can keep that. Like we can have any application, like we have the auth project with the Node.js, right? Then we need to add something which is the authorized JavaScript origins, right? So inside that, we need to add a URI for use with requests from a browser. So currently our application is at the localhost port of 5000. So we need to add that details. That's it, right? We can add the add URI, HTTP, we have the localhost, the port of 5000. That's it. So we just need to add the URL. Now we have the redirect URL. So after the authentication will be completed from the Google, we need to add a callback URL. So which callback URL the Google will call our application, right? So after the authentication, Google will send a request, a callback request to our application so that we can manage the authentication and the secrets, right? We can move on. We just need a callback URL. We will define that URL within our application. We have the local host. That could be, we have the 5000 slash. We can move on. We have the auth. We have the Google. We have the callback. So we'll be defining this route inside our application and the Passport will manage that. So we'll be working with that. Now, after we have these details, we can just need to click on create so that we can create the secrets, right? So you can see now we have some secrets inside our application. So this is my client ID and this is my secret. So I've hidden that because like I don't want to share my secrets with anyone. So you can create your own secrets and you can also download the JSON from there. All right. So let's move on. And after that, you can move ahead to our application and then you can create a new file which is .env, which is the environment variables. So you can add the secrets over there. Like I'll be adding my secrets over there like this. So this is my client ID and the client secret. So these are my environment variables for this application. Now we can move on and now we can work with the passport, right? Now we'll be working with the Passport.js over there. So let's get started with that. Now we have added the client ID and the client secret inside the environment. So the next step could be we just need to use the app.use. And this time we'll be needing, I think instead of the app.use, we need to use the passport.use here. So inside that, we need to use a new Google strategy. We need to create a new instance of the Google strategy class. So inside that, now what do we want to do? We just need to move on and we just need to provide the details. We just need to provide the details. Like the first detail could be we have the client ID, right? We have the client ID. So make sure you have the ID in the caps format. Now we have the client ID. That could be the process dot environment dot we have the client ID, right? And the next parameter would be we have the client secret, right? We have the client secret that we have to provide. So secret again could be we need to use from the process. We have the client secret from the environment. Again, the final thing that we have to add, we had a callback URL, right? We have a callback URL. So this is very important parameter, the callback URL. So this should be the same callback URL which we added inside the auth consent screen, right? We need to add the same callback URL. So that could be slash auth slash we have the Google slash we have the callback, right? So that's this needs to be the same callback URL again. So now we have the middleware for the Google strategy. Now we just need to define the routes for the authentication. So the first route we can use here the passport. I think we have the app dot, we have the get. So this should be the get route over there. And inside this route, we can have the slash, we can have the auth slash Google. So it means whenever we want to add a Google authentication, we just need to use the slash auth slash Google. And another route that we have to add, we have the app dot, again we have the get. So this route could be, we can move on, we can have for the callback as well. So this same route of the callback, we need the same route here as well, right? So inside the auth Google, now what we want to do here, we just need to move on here. We need to just use the passport dot authenticate. And that's it. We just need to use the passport dot authenticate. And in this, we need to use a Google because we'll be using the Google strategy. And that's it. So it is that easy to provide these details, right? And another thing that you have to provide, you need to provide the scope as well to this. Right, you need to provide the scope. Inside that, you need to provide the scope. Could be we can have the array. So what properties of the user object that you want to see? So first thing, we need to use the profile of the user, right? We need to have a profile. Then we can have another thing, which is we have the email. So these are the details which we require for this specific route, all right? And after that, we can move on, and that's it. So this only route we require for the authentication, and that's it. So this is how easy the passport is with using the Node.js. And now inside the callback, we can move on. So here again, we can move on. We can just use again the passport. Here we have the passport dot authenticate again. So inside that again, we have to provide the Google, but this time this is a callback. At this step, the Google is already like the Google login is already successful. If we have this step, we can just need to add one thing, which is a failure redirect. So if our application is failed, like if the authentication is failed, we can just again move on to the login, right? So that is a failure redirect to our application, and that's it. And now after the callback, if we have to see anything, like if we have to use any middleware, any separate middleware, we can use like this. And then in the response, you can send the response dot send. That could be, I think you can have the response dot send. That could be the exact user object that you want to send. We can just have the request dot user like that. So the user property will be the user property which is coming from the Google. So this property is being added to the request by the passport. This is the exact user object which is going to come after you are successfully authenticated from the Google, right? So let's move on. So that's it for now. And now we can move on. Now we can just try and authenticate. And yeah, one last thing which we are missing is we want to serialize the user as well. So sometimes the data comes as a raw data. So we have to serialize the user. So how we can do that? So we just need to move on. We just need to have the passport dot, we have the serialized user. That's it. So inside this object, now what exactly do we want to do? So what happens inside that? So this is a callback. So this is another type of callback when we are authenticated. So in this, we'll be getting the user and the error. So it means we will have a serialization, right? We have the error. And inside that, I think we don't have the error. We have the done here. We have the done. So when the serialization is complete, so in this step, we add the session IDs to the user. We add the session IDs to the request, like we have the request dot user ID or something with that, right? So at this step, what exactly we do is we store the user inside the databases and all. So that's why we have the serialization of the user at this step. We either store the user ID, we either fetch the user ID, or we can add the validations. So for now, we can just use the done. So inside that, we are providing the complete user. So the recommended way is using the user.id property over there inside that. But for now, we can use the user as well. We don't have any issue. And again, we need to use another function which is similar to this, which is deserialize user. And that's it. We just need to move on. We just need to call the deserialize as well, like this. Now what we want to do, so inside the done, this is an error first callback. So if you don't provide the error as the first property, so it will take this parameter as the error. So first parameter could be the null always, because that's the error first property. Again, we can use the null like that. And that's it for now. So now we are quite done with this setup. Now we can just try with the npm run dev, and let's see what happens. Okay, we have an error. So inside that, you can see requires a verify callback. And one thing which we are missing currently is we need to move on to the Google strategy where we are using that. And the second parameter here is what exactly do we get? Right. So we get few things from there. We get few things like that. So in the few things, first we get the access token, right? We get the access token. The second thing that we get is we get the refresh token as well, right? And the third thing that we get is we get the profile. And the last thing we get the done callback, right? So these are the four properties when we use the passport.use for any strategy. In future, that could be the GitHub strategy. So same things you are gonna get from the passport, right? So inside that, you just need to move on. You just need to return the done, right? You just need to return the done. Again, you can have the null for now as the error, and the user property, exact user property, or you can have the profile for the exact details, right? So now we can try that out. We can have something which is clear screen. We have the npm run dev, and then I think we have a error over there, right? Oh, sorry, it does not need to be there. It needs to be there. So we just need to move on. It needs to be there at this step, right? So that's it for now. You can say that's it. Now we have completed that step as well. Now we can just move on with that. So inside that, you can see after the new Google strategy. So the second parameter would be this, right? Now we can try that out. We can have the npm run dev. And I think we are getting the error from the environment. So we need to move on. We just need to import something from the .env, right? We have the const.env, that could be equals to, we have the require, again we have the require, that could be, we can have the .env, and then we need to just require the config, right? We just need to call the .env over there, and that's it. So the configuration of the .env will be completed at this step. Now we can just try one last time that what happens. So you can see now we are seeing the server open. It means everything should be working perfectly fine. Now, the next step could be, now from the login file, now we need to add something. We need to add a script inside the login, and then we need to redirect the user to this callback function. Now we need to redirect the user to the authenticate via Google, like this, right? But if we directly move on, we can directly move on to that as well. If we move on, so we can just move on with that. We have the /auth /Google. We can hit on that. So you can see now we'll be seeing the details. Right now we'll be getting the details like this, like the sign in with Google, right? And if you use any official Chrome, so you can see this Chrome doesn't have a signed in. This Chrome is not signed in. So either I can use this, right? So I can have the localhost 5000 slash, we can have the API /auth/Google, right? I think we don't have the API, we can have the auth/Google. So if we enter into that, so you can see now I can see some details, right? I can see the complete details of mine, right? So because now we are into the callback, you can see all of the details are there. But if I can try with any other uh, profile as well, like this profile, I can try. So we can move on. I can move on with that, right? The local host port, we can have the 5000 slash, we can have the auth/Google. So we should be getting the details like that. So you can see now I can sign in with now. So you can see now choose an account. So I can use this account for the sign in, and everything should be working perfectly fine. And then you will see the details over there like that. You will see the sign in to my app one, and you can hit on continue. And now you can see now you have the complete details, right? Now you have the complete details over there of the user. So you can see now it is working perfectly fine. So all of the things are working clearly. So you can see that's how we can set up the Google OAuth with that. Right now, the final thing, we can add a few more HTML content into that. So from the login button, we should be logged in, and then we can see the profile of the user as well as an additional step. Now we can move on. So now, as we have the raw details over there, now we can move on, and now we can work with the HTML file. So in the button, we can provide an ID. That could be the ID, that could be the login. We have the login button, right? And now we can add a script part over there at the end. So inside the end of the body, we can add a script tag. So inside the script, we can just move on and we can just add the details. So when the document is loaded, we can just add an event. We have the document dot, we can have the own DOM. So when the document is loaded, then we can add an event. We have the add event listener. That could be, we can have the DOM content loaded. Inside there, we can add a callback function. So in this callback, now what we want to do. So we have this button, right? We have this button. So we can just have again the document dot get element by id. That is, we have this button, right? We have the login button. We can perform with that. Then we can just have the add event listener again. So event listener will be the click. So whenever we have to click on this button, we can just redirect the user to this page, right? We can redirect the user to the auth Google page. We can move on with that. So we can just have the window dot location dot we have the ref that could be equals to this, right? We can move on with that. So now we have to provide the details as well, which is the domain. We have the http localhost, the port, we have the 5000 like that. We have the auth Google. So we can have these details. Now we can move on. So inside this, if we can move on to the localhost 5000, right? Now we can move on to the login, right? We have the login with Google. Now, if we hit on that, now we should be moved on to the Google, right? You can see now we are currently logged in. So that's why we already have these details, right? And now the last thing that we can do is we can just move on. We can add the profile details as well for the user, right? So we can add the profile details after the login. We can have the app dot, we can have the get, that could be, we can have the profile, right? So inside that, we can just move on. We can just share some details. Like we can generate the HTML contact here as well. We don't need to generate a new HTML file. Instead, we can generate the HTML here. That could be equals to, we can have the, I think the H1, that could be the welcome. And we can have the username like this. We can have the request like that. We need to use the request parameter, response parameter, right? We have the request dot, we have the user dot, we can have the name like that, right? And then we can close the h1 tag, right? Then we can have some we can have a body as well, or sorry, we can just have the paragraph tag over there like this. We have the paragraph, and inside there we can just move on. We can just share the details again. We can have some details like we have the json dot stringify, that could be the user, request dot user, right? And then we can move on. After the user, we can just add the button as well. Again, we have the button. This button is for the logout, right? We have a logout button. So this button, we have the logout. So instead, I think instead of the button, we can just have the anchor tag for the logout, and we can have the ref, that could be, we can have slash logout, right? We have the slash logout for that. Now we can move on. So after that, we can just return the response dot send this HTML, and let's see if everything works fine. And then we can just move on to the profile after we are into the authentication, right? So after we are successfully authenticated within the callback, we can just add these details, right? So here, instead of sending the request.user, we can have the request dot redirect like this. We have the redirect, that could be into the profile, right? And let's see if that works or not. So I'm also confused. Will that work? So if we reload again, we have the 5000 slash, we have the login. So you can see login with Google. Now we're into that. So you can see welcome. We have the user property. You can see welcome. We have the project. We have the object. And there you can see we have these details. And then we have the logout as well. So now we haven't defined any logout route. So we have to define that. So for the object, we can just move on quickly. And instead of the user, you can see we have the user.display name. All right, we have the display name. So we can move on. We have the request.user.display name instead of that. And then we can try that out again. And now if we can reload, so I think we don't have the properties of the display name. Okay. I think we can move on, and then we can check why the properties are not there. So we'll check that again. So I think the session was destroyed, so we have to move on. Instead of this, we can again use the display name property over there, right? And then you can add some few more things as well if you want. You can add few more details like this as well. I've added some properties like the json.stringify if we have to use the complete user object, or if we have to use the image, we can use the image as well. So I don't have any image with that, so image would be empty. Then we have the email as well. We can just try that out once again with the npm run dev and hope so it works. If we move on to the login, right, we have the login with Google. If we hit on that, so you can see now we have the details like the welcome Nikhil Thadani, and we have the email as well. So that's it. Everything is working perfectly fine. Now the final thing, we should move on to the logout. Right, we should move on to the logout route over there. We can just have the request, oh sorry, we have the app dot get, that could be we have the logout like that. So inside that, we just need to move on. We just need to have the request response. We just need to use one thing inside the logout. It is very, very simple route. We just need to destroy the session. So we can have the request dot session dot destroy. So the session would be destroyed inside that. So you can add a callback if we have any error destroying the session. We can have the console.log for the error, right? And then we can have the response dot redirect the user, all right, into again the login page. Right, we can have the response dot redirect to the login, and again inside the profile you can add a validation check if you want, like the request dot is authenticated. You have the property of the is authenticated as well if you want. Then only you have to share these details, or otherwise you will hang up within an error, right? So that's why you can do that, or else you can move on. You can have the return response dot send. We have the invalid or unauthenticated, like that, right? Same you can do with the login as well, right? If the we can have the request dot is authenticated again, or you can have the is unauthenticated, then only you need to move forward, right? Then only you need to move forward like that. You can use that, or else again you can move on. You can have the response dot you have the send like that. That could be the user already logged in, right? You can have the HTML again, that could be the A again. You can have the A again, then you can have just move on. And again, the A tag, that could be the profile like that, right? Profile. And that could be again, we have the ref route over there. We have the ref, that could be equals to, we have slash profile, right? Right. So these will be the details for that, right? So that's how we want to work with this. So let's again reload this application and again check how it works, right? So if we have the npm run dev, so you can see now we have the welcome Nikhil Tadani. If we move on to profile, so you can see now we are unauthenticated. So that's why we are seeing the details. We can move on. So we can just move on to the login, right? We have the login with Google. We can move on with that. Now we are logged in. We can hit on the logout as well. So you can see now we are again login with Google. We can hit on that. We are into the profile. And again, if we move on to the login, right? User already logged in. You can move on to the profile to see the profile. So you can see that is the complete project that we have completed. So this was a OAuth with the Google. So you can see the project was very simple. So just you need to understand how the handling of the users and all these things will be working, right? So that is the final step of this project. Now we have completed that. No more coding part. So that's it for now. So I'll be pushing this code to the Google, and make sure you use your own environment IDs and all, because I'll be disabling all that, right? So that's it. So hope you like this project and hope you will subscribe to the channel as well. So like I was not active to the YouTube since last 3-4 months, and again since last 1 year only. So now I'm coming back to that. I'm giving some more time, taking out some more time to the YouTube as well to make some new projects. And now I'll be just creating the series of the Node.js projects. So there will be multiple projects, the production ready projects of the Node.js as well. So that's it from my side. So have a nice day. So have a nice day.